Hey, it's time to start talking a little bit more about Scrivener, what my experiences have been like so far using it, and how I'm currently using it for my high fantasy project. Hello there, my name is Tanya. I am an independent author. I have been self-publishing for a couple of years, and I'm loving it. First, just a couple of little personal notes. If you hear a fan-like sound kick in, it's because my central air is running. It is super hot out. I know it is only June, but it feels like the middle of July. Also, I apologize if I sound a little nasally or, start coughing. It is because of my allergies. But let's get into the writing part of it. I have always been a Microsoft Office person. I have been using Word for a very long time. So when I first tried out Scrivener, I was a little intimidated. So back in 2020, I had taken advantage of the Nano gift, the discount on buying Scrivener for Windows. So Scrivener, if you didn't know, was originally designed, built, and programmed to be used on a Mac. However, they did eventually start releasing Windows versions. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to go ahead and try it, but I have other writing friends locally, and also I've heard other people on YouTube talk about how awesome Scrivener is, and I thought, okay, I'm going to finally give this a shot. So I used it in 2020 for Nano. I used my 2019 credit to purchase Scrivener, but then I actually used it to write Nano in 2020. I was very upset, to be honest. I lost a lot of my writing while using it during Nano. I probably lost about 2,500 to 3,000 words because it basically just crashed on me. I have never had any other writing software crash on me the way that Scrivener did. I was very upset and frustrated. So of course I was then behind on Nano. I did eventually catch up and complete the 50,000 words and beyond by the end of November of 2020. So anyways, after that, I decided to go back to Word because I trust it. I have no problems using Word. It's very user-friendly, and there are things in Word that act similar to using Scrivener, and so I just taught myself how to use it the way I needed to, and I stuck with it. However, the company that built Scrivener has actually come out with a more up-to-date Windows version. So when I checked that out, it turned out that I could get a free upgrade because of how recent I had purchased the first version. So today we're just going to go over kind of the basics and how I use it and some of the new really cool tools that I have found so helpful when I'm writing. Now, how do I know which project to use Scrivener for? I still use Word quite often, especially for the more simpler projects, but Scrivener has these unique tools within the software that allows you to organize things a little bit better and to, like things like their corkboard and their character line, like their POV lines, which is really cool. At least that's how I refer to it as. I don't know what the actual official name is for it. So let's dig into this. On my screen here, I just opened a brand new blank document or project, so to speak. So normally the first thing that I look at doing, which I don't know why it didn't save it on here, is I look at the color of the screen here. So let's just change this. I go to Windows and Themes, and I usually use either dark mode or gray matter dark. Please restart Scrivener. So then you always, whenever you change a theme, you always have to reopen Scrivener. And of course, they did change the icon for the newer version of Scrivener. Some of the older versions of Scrivener have different icons. Now, I don't know why this isn't opening for me. Let's try this again. And it's opening on my other screen, so I will just have to move this over for you. Oh, no, there it is. Right on. Now, I really enjoy using the darker modes, basically because my eyes are sensitive to light and it can increase the risk of me having seizures. So I enjoy dark mode. So the first thing that I kind of do is I set up some folders. So on the left side here, this pane really offers some great detail on how you can break out your stories, your ebook layout, your print book layout, and all of that. So the first thing I do is I add a folder, actually, not a little. Okay, so new folder. Now I call this front matter. Again, I'm not a pro with Scrivener. I'm just going to show you how I use it. Now, before we add another one, I have to click back up and draft. Otherwise, it will add the folder as like a subfolder. All right, new folder, back matter, and then back up here, add a new folder. And for purposes of this, normally if I'm doing like one book, I'll put the title here of the book, or I will do like part 1 and then do part 2, part 3, whatever. So this is going to be obviously in the middle, because first is the front matter, then is part 1, and then it's back matter. Now the other folder that I add is anything else that I want for personal notes as reference. So for example, if I want to do character sheets, okay, so each of my characters as I create them get their own unique sheet, so I can take notes. And I'll show you what I mean by sheets. So while I'm still clicked on the character sheets, I'm going to add a new text, and I'm going to call this, I don't know, Bob. All right, so Bob's my first character. Click back up here. You can also right click and add a new text file, or a new text sheet rather than going up to the plus sign again. Bob, let's call this Sue. All right, this is just an example. So I could put in here, you know, the character description, who they are, what their age is. I do have a template laid out, which maybe I'll show you that after. I kind of copy or duplicate each sheet, a blank template, and then I just change the names and fill in all of the blank information, like the age, the sex, the race, the species, depends on what I'm writing. Now these here, I've obviously added by mistake one of them, but I do rename one of these by double clicking to, I put my name. Now this sounds really funny. You can do whatever it is that works best for you, but this is like my don't forget. So say I'm writing a scene and I think, oh crap, this hasn't happened in the story yet, so I need to rearrange things, and I still have to write a different scene. So then I'll go in here and say like, oh, hold on, enter. So I'll say like, don't forget to make sure he meets the girl first, or don't forget that Bob has to learn to cast fire magic first, or just things that I want to remember while I'm writing or working on certain pieces of each story. All right, so then I go in here and again I add whatever I need to, like title, whoops, I got my caps lock on. So like title page, add a new text here, table of contents, anyways, that kind of thing. Now part 1, now some people do this a little bit differently. I use each sheet as a chapter. Some people choose to use each sheet as like a scene. Okay, so normally what I do is I click on the meat of the book, which for me is part 1. I might have 3 folders in here, part 1, part 2, part 3. And then I add in a new text and I say, you know, chapter 1 or whatever, and I start writing. And as I add more and more chapters, oops, I actually rename them to the name of the chapter. I only add them as I go because I have no idea how many chapters I'm going to have in the end. So when I'm writing fantasy, I might name the chapter, you know, Blood Oath, and then I'll put the character's name. So say this is in Bob's perspective below it. Then of course, you know, we're going to change the setup so that this comes up as a heading. We want to make sure that it is a heading 1 so that we know it's like a chapter title. And then we start writing. Now you can of course play with your justification. I use fully justified so that we're not, centering or leaving odd gaps on the right. I know that's more part of the formatting thing, but the more formatting you do while you're writing the story, the less you have to worry about cleaning up in the end. So I've just gotten into the habit of doing things like the full justification while I write. And of course, setting up the spacing and so on. I start with bigger spacing because when you get to the editing part, some people prefer, like if you're doing peer edits, some people prefer it to be printed out, and it's easier for people to write their suggested edits when there's more spacing to write those suggested edits, if that makes any sense. All right, so now when you have multiple chapters here, and you finish your first draft, or I should be saying, when I finish my first draft, I tend to go back and start, some people call it a rewrite. I don't call it a rewrite. I call it an edit. When I first start my self-edit and I vamp up each of these chapters and I start really working away at improving the quality of, the storyline, the plot, the character development. I check all of their dialogue, all and so on. I need to know where I'm at so that if it ends up being, I have a busy lifestyle, if it ends up being 2 weeks apart before I actually have time to come in and start working on this again, I need to know where I'm left off at. So what I do is I change the icon of this chapter to like a flag or a color. So change icon. I really like using flags. It's just a personal preference. So like say I want to change it to a red. All right. So now I leave this for 2 weeks. I come back. I go to wherever the red flag is and I kind of read all the way from the beginning of that chapter, and I keep going down so that I will pick up on basically whatever my thought process was the last time I was working on it. Now, sometimes if it's been a couple of months, because again, I'm busy, then I tend to read more than just the chapter I'm currently editing. I kind of go back and read a couple of chapters and before I skip down to where I've left off at. All right, now comes one of the fun parts. I use the corkboard quite often. So when you click on this part 1, the folder, anything within that folder, which is kind of justified a little bit more to the right, within, like below that folder on the left side of the screen, what you can do is you can actually write on each of these, right? As kind of, if you've used Scrivener before, you probably already know this, but Bob takes a blood oath and learns he was born with a natural fire elemental magic. That is basically the gist and the purpose of chapter 1. This is just an example. I'm not actually writing something here. So chapter 2 is in Sue's perspective, because when it comes to fantasy, of course, you normally have more than one character, multiple perspectives, and most people prefer to jump back and forth chapter to chapter in between the different perspectives. So let's just say Sue is terrified. Someone will find out she's been using dark magic. Okay, so that's just kind of the perspective of how she's feeling. Maybe we go into more detail about who's in the scene. Depending on if you're on a PC or on a laptop, you may have a lot less space. So for me, when I go onto my laptop to write with Scrivener, I find that the recipe cards are a lot smaller, so I can't fit in as much that I could easily or visually see on this section. Okay, so depending on which icon you select here, you can see everything as a list instead of like recipe cards. This is the corkboard view, and this is your details here. And now we're back to this little notepad here will show us everything that's written, like the actual document itself. But let's go back to the corkboard. All right, now The cool part about this version of Scrivener, I believe it's Scrivener 3, I could be wrong, is you can actually drag and drop all of your chapters into the multiple perspectives so that you kind of have like a plot line. I'm just going to show you, okay? So down here in the bottom right hand side is a little icon. Now what you use these lines for is completely up to you. What I choose to use it for is perspective, because I am writing in multiple perspectives, and that is one of the reasons why I enjoy using Scrivener for high fantasy, is because I'm going to be writing in a buttload of perspectives. So what I do is whoever starts chapter 1 is on the top line of this screen. Whoever is in chapter 2, or whenever the perspective changes, I drag it down. Now this is not going to affect the structure or the layout at all of your chapters, okay? And then if I'm going to a third perspective, they get the next line and so on. So if I go back to the first character in chapter 4, it stays on the top line and I keep moving down, and it'll be kind of like a pattern if I'm following a specific pattern, you know, ABC, character ABC. I hope I haven't lost you yet. I know I'm kind of jumbling. I didn't plan a specific script or anything for this. I'm just kind of winging it. Now, of course, if you moved, you know, chapter 4 over, it would physically relocate the entire chapter, even here. And same thing with this. If I drag the chapter up here, it's going to physically represent where it's been moved to in this chart, but it's going to stay on the same line that you had already had it set to. So I'll just, you know, fix this back to chapter 4, chapter 3, and again, you can do the same thing with scenes. Whatever each note is gets its own line or its own recipe card, so to speak, on this. Now you can also do a vertical line instead of a horizontal. So far I've been using the horizontal lines, not that I can find my way back to them. Wow. Okay, so there's lots of different ways of looking at it. I just choose to go with the vertical lines if I can, no, the horizontal lines, I mean, if I can get back to it. Well, this has been fun. Thanks for watching me screw up on Scrivener. Now again, I am no Scrivener pro. Now most of the people that I write with, that I'm friends with, and they help me with the peer editing, they aren't working in Scrivener. They use Microsoft Word. So what I'm going to have to do, I haven't done this yet, is I'm going to have to compile it into a Word document, maybe play with the formatting again, because sometimes the formatting will change between Scrivener and Word. And then I'll send it out for the peer edits, and when I get it back, I'll edit it in Word, and then I'm going to have to re-upload it in Scrivener. Now the reason for that is I want to play around with the eBook compile. So you can actually save or convert your story directly into an ebook or EPUB, or a document or a PDF directly in Scrivener, and that was one of the biggest selling points for me. I want to be able to format my own ebooks, and so that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. Is I'll start with Scrivener, move to Word, move back to Scrivener once the editing process is completely done, and then I'll format everything. I'll compile it into an ebook file or an EPUB file, and then I'll compile it into a print book file or PDF so that I can do both the print book and an ebook version directly from Scrivener. It's going to be a learning process, but as I learn stuff along the way, of course, I will share it with you. So using Scrivener to do all the compile into the different formatting types will help me with having to use the Kindle Create, which I've had some issues with recently. It'll also save me from having to use the Draft to Digital online conversion tool. It is great, but I would like to have a little bit more control, because I'm a little bit of a control freak on how my formatting and structure looks. Now, one other file, of course, that I forgot to mention is I also do a location folder or a scene folder, so that if I have like a recurring scene that is used, like, you know, a specific city or a specific river or something like that, I also go in here, I log in, you know, the history, if there is a history that I need to be aware of. I go and do the, you know, the backstory, or who controlled it, was there a war that has taken place in this city or place. Yes. Now the other folder you could do is like, I don't know, not the species or race, I don't know what you would call it for high fantasy, but you know, like the elves, the dwarves, the dragons. If you're doing, you know, a typical high fantasy like Lord of the Rings style story, then you could have one little notepad for each, like high elves or something. You could do a backstory, you could say the relationships between each of the different races, like how do they connect with the dwarves? Do they get along? Are they friends? Do they hate each other? Do they fight over their gemstones? Are they best friends? Or maybe they're enslaved. Maybe the elves have enslaved the dwarves to build all of their armor. Who knows, whoever you're doing this. Anyways, I hope that this has given you, I don't know, some ideas. Maybe you've picked up something. I don't know. I'm still learning to use Scrivener. I am not a pro, but I'm hoping that I will learn some more and I can do some more videos as I learn more tricks and tools. Yes, so that's about it for today. Have you used Scrivener yet? Do you do similar kind of a setup to what I do? I don't use their templates. You know, they kind of have this book template that has front matter, back matter, and all of that. I referred to it as kind of a guide, but I'm one of those people that likes to do things my own way, so I kind of set things up from scratch myself right off the hop so that I can be a little bit more flexible. I mean, of course you can change things on the template as you go, but I like to start with a fresh plate, fresh, empty, boring plate, and kind of decorate it myself, so to speak, you know. So because I've enjoyed Scrivener so much thus far, I did set myself up as an affiliate just because I believe in the product itself so far. So I do have an affiliate link below if this is something that you're interested in checking out. If not, that's totally cool. You don't have to use the link at all. It was just another opportunity possibly for some potential side income to help support my publication business. So have a great rest of your day, afternoon, evening, night, or whatever, and keep writing.